To all that are listening, I would like to give my thoughts on the Women's March. First off, the Women's March is nothing but a leftist hug fest. It has only things to do with women and their male allies that agree with the progressive narrative of our daily politics. Not really shocking that Sarsour does not like Hillary Clinton, since Clinton is a neoliberal and Sarsour is real cozy with Bernie Sanders. At last year's Women's March, a contingency of women that were considered more conservative and considered themselves pro-life were excluded from the march. So much for it being a women's march. I mean, how can you call it a women's march when it excludes certain numbers of women? Secondly, what's the point? They have no clearly defined goals. At least with first-wave feminism, they fought for the right to vote, and with second-wave feminism, it was about reproductive rights and workplace equality. All previous goals were achieved. Even Linda Sarsour said herself that the movement is intersectional and will include as many concerns as possible. The problems with intersectionality are for another post, but I see the Women's March running into the same problem as Occupy did. Occupy didn't have clearly defined goals or benchmarks anyways, just as the Women's March doesn't. The only thing Occupy did was start a conversation about income inequality. But the most, it's a hollow victory, considering that what steps have been taken to correct income inequality. Matter of fact, the rich have gotten even richer and the poor have gotten even poorer. So if the Women's March is going to have any kind of impact, it needs to have clearly defined goals. It needs to have certain benchmarks it needs to achieve. Thirdly, Sarsour is a hypocrite. Sarsour speaks of women's liberation and rights, but yet supports Sharia law, which is a legal and moral code that is the most oppressive to women worldwide. Matter of fact, for example, if you take into a rape case, there has to be four male witnesses, four neutral witnesses, male witnesses, in order for any kind of substantial legal proceedings going against a man. And a woman's testimony is worth half that of a man's. Okay? So women are thought of half of a man. And if a woman cannot prove rape, she is considered an adulteress and she is stoned to death. Okay? So much for women's equality. The Iranian protests that happened most recently was a clarion call to address the abuses of a repressive theocracy. But Sarsour was definitely silent on this, except to condemn those who are trying to make this known. Besides, for a woman who fetishizes her hijab as a garb of freedom, it would counter her narrative to the women in Iran who are forced by law to wear the chador. Lastly, this Twitter hashtag that is being trending, "You don't speak for me, Linda," is very telling, and let me tell you why it is very telling. It is a microcosm of me of how the left will eat itself from the inside out. Currently battling for the hearts and minds of the Democrats are the neoliberal Clintonian faction and the Sanders progressives. I wring my hands in glee for the civil war occurring within such corrupt and morally bankrupt apparatus like the Democratic Party. Besides, it was the Democratic Party that screwed Bernie Sanders out of the nomination, as proof was shown in the Podesta emails. And it was Hillary Clinton taking hundreds of millions of dollars from the Saudi royal family. And it was Hillary Clinton that wanted to start wars with Iran and possibly start wars with Russia, trying to establish a no-fly zone over Aleppo. But funny, who's absent from all this, when you're talking about factions within the Democrats, are labor, are the unionists like Jim Webb. It's funny because a lot of your labor force has went to Donald Trump, because Donald Trump had actually promised to bring back manufacturing jobs. That's probably not going to happen. One, because of the fact that it's cheaper to produce things in places like China and India. And two, if there are any manufacturing jobs, it's going to be automated. So I knew them promises weren't going to happen anyways. And, the Republicans are facing the same crisis, but the Republicans at least have Donald Trump as the face of the Republican Party, if that says anything. At least there is a leader. They're not all coalescing around him, because you still got within the Republican Party, the GOP, your neoconservatives like, say, Sean Hannity, and who pretty much is a Trumpite now. He's pretty much on the side of Trump, because no matter what, he's still a Republican lapdog. But the Bushlights are all but non-existent. You still have people like John McCain, who's a neocon, and Mitch McConnell, who's a prominent neocon. And you have your libertarians like Rand Paul, who's a bit more sane in his policies. And you have some evangelocons like Ted Cruz. And you have a growing faction that is further right, your alt-right, and even further right than that, the alt-right. Let's get real here. The alt-right is a block within the Republican Party. And Trump has to throw him a bone. He has to throw the neocons a bone. He has to throw the evangelocons a bone with this recent steps to try to make abortion that much more inaccessible to women. Yeah, he has to throw all these factions a bone, but at least he has a chance to make the party in his own image. The Women's March has never been about women. It is about power and ideology, which is encapsulated into one odious individual, Linda Sarsour. Keep in mind, this is the same woman who said that she would want to cut off Ayaan Hirsi Ali's pussy and take it away from her. Keep in mind, Ayaan Hirsi Ali survived genital mutilation, being from Somalia, which is a predominantly Muslim country. That, by the way, is one of 10 countries in the world that have outlawed homosexuality as being a crime. Not only it's a crime that is punishable, through the law, but it carries the death penalty, along with 9 other nations that have predominantly large Islamic populations. So, in closing, the Democrats are in crisis. They are wanting to pass legislation like DACA and other reforms that would ease immigration, because of the fact they're not going to get as much of the white vote as they used to if they keep shitting on white people. If you have, even within their own faction that's eating themselves alive, those who say we don't want white feminism, we hate white feminism. When you look at those 3 pictures they published in the newspapers last year of the Women's March, you had one black woman, you had a Hispanic woman with a flower in her hair, and you had a woman wearing a hijab, which is the most prominent symbol. Intersectional feminism, does it cover conservative blacks? Does it cover fundamentalist Muslims? How in the hell can a person who supports Sharia be lockstep with someone who supports rights of the LGBT community? And it's funny, gays have all of a sudden been thrown under the bus ever since the shooting happened in Orlando. It was no longer about combating extremism and LGBT hate within an extremist ideology like Islam. No, it was about protecting the poor widow Muslims that were going to get persecuted in America. Fuck that noise. Yeah, they're probably going to have some backlash, and I feel bad for them, but ultimately, if you keep becoming a goddamn apologist for your religion, and instead of trying to distance yourself from your bad apples, but actually accept the fact that there's a problem in your fucking religion, you're never going to reform. And maybe y'all don't want to reform because there's not any pressure for you to reform. Look what's happening in goddamn Europe. Alright, this video has gone on long enough. I just want to give my thoughts on the Women's March. And If you like this video, hit that like button. Please subscribe to this channel. I'm going to be back, and I'm going to try to make more videos as I go along. Thank you. Bless every one of you, and have a good day.